You're muted, Max.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Max. Ayla, Katrina, and I did our presentation on the combustion engine. So how does a combustion engine work? Well, air from outside is moved into a piston, pretty much a cylinder inside the engine, where it's mixed with fuel. And that fuel air mixture is then ignited with a spark to trigger a chemical reaction that creates carbon dioxide, water, and a lot of heat. It's essentially like a tiny explosion. And that creates like a lot of pressure that pushes down on a piston and it like turns a crank to create rotary motion, which then turns the wheels of a car. You can see we have the chemical formula at the bottom. The problem with the internal combustion engine is that there are a lot of harmful byproducts. Because even though there's just fuel and air going into in the chemical reaction, there's a lot of what's the word? Uh, Imperfections in the fuel and air. You know, the fuel could be dirty, or like dirt from the fuel pump could go into your engine. The air could be dirty. So it creates a lot of harmful byproducts like nitrogen oxides and hydrocarbons. Nitrogen oxides are pretty much caused by the nitrogen in the air combusting in the fuel tank or in the cylinder and is released through the exhaust. And when that happens, it goes into the atmosphere and mixes with sulfur dioxide and creates acid rain. Um, Acid rain isn't very harmful, but it it's only a pH of 4. But over time, like it getting into the rivers and dirt can change the pH and end up harming the wildlife and plant life.
Okay, so another one of the issues is the product of the combustion reaction itself. Carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere from the gas engines. And carbon dioxide is one of the greenhouse gases that's contributing to our global warming crisis. And then some other, there's like a lot of different greenhouse gases, but carbon dioxide also contributes to depleting the ozone layer that's protecting us from harmful radiation from the sun. And most of the contribution to greenhouse gases is from carbon dioxide. Oh, sorry, I wasn't done with that one. About 1.6 billion tons of greenhouse gases are released by cars alone each year. And the worse a car's gas mileage is, the more carbon dioxide it will be releasing. Now you can switch. Another issue is leaded gasoline. So gasolines used to be treated with lead to prevent knockback issues in the engines of older cars and valve seat recessions. But unfortunately, lead is highly toxic and it doesn't evaporate or get used up in the process of the combustion reaction. So it's just kind of left over as a particle. And all the lead byproducts were seeping into the water sources, the crop water, and then eventually our food and the drinking water. And that led to a lot of illnesses in populations because it's toxic to have lead in your blood. And especially children have a higher susceptibility to lead poisoning. Another one, I covered already that, yeah, vehicles with a bad gas mileage produce more carbon dioxide. than better performing cars. And then particulates. So combustion engines and diesel engines in particular release black soot and metal byproducts. But most modern trucks have filters to prevent those being released into the atmosphere. Unfortunately, there's the popular trend called rolling coal, where drivers purposefully take out those filters and blow out the soot anyways to be obnoxious. And even though it is obnoxious, it's only like banned in 10 states, California being one of them, Texas being one of them, I think Utah. So yeah, that's another pollution factor caused by cars.
All right, so we have talked about the issue with CO2 and then all this other stuff. One of the ways you can do or to battle this issue is going electric. And I mean, we already heard some people in our class talk about like electric cars and everything. And so it decreases like the greenhouse gas emissions, especially with CO2. And I think there's some people who do like argue that, oh, like, you know, what about the battery? And like when you make electric cars as opposed to petrol engines or gasoline based engines or whatever cars, the emissions from making electric cars are higher in the process of like manufacturing them. But when you have for gas cars, it's less, but in long terms, the effect on the environment is less. So even though it makes more emissions to make an electric car, in the long term, they're not going to leave as much of a impact on the environment as much as regular engines. But if you do want to go with just a regular engine and drive on gasoline, you can use a catalytic converter, and those were installed in 1976. That's to reduce all the stuff that goes out into the air and like into the atmosphere, things like hydrocarbons, nitrogen dioxides, nitric acid, all of that stuff is terrible for the environment. Also, they got rid of leaded gasoline because that was also terrible for the environment. And so if we go into the next slide, we're going to talk about the catalytic converter and how it's a good way to help at least with the impact on the environment. So if you look at the blue car, underneath, if you can see it, there's a catalytic converter. And inside of that catalytic converter, you have, you can find things like platinum, palladium, and rhodium. And those are precious metals that help catalyze a redox reaction. So this is already your oxidation and your reduction reactions that we learned about. And this basically takes things like carbon monoxide, as I mentioned before, nitrogen oxides, nitrogen dioxide, nitric acid, basically stuff in that family, and then the hydrocarbons. And those are from when the hydrocarbons are basically things like, it's like gasoline that hasn't necessarily been fully burnt or it's been partially burnt. And it takes those chemicals, and it turns them into something that is a little bit more environmentally friendly. So things like water, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, that's much better for the atmosphere than things like carbon monoxide. And I looked at a study in 1973. They did this research thing. So they found out that people who did not have catalytic converters, this is back before they started enforcing catalytic converters, they did a study where they had people drive an hour and 30 minutes on a Los Angeles freeway. And they found that people who had already pre-existing heart conditions, they had, I think they're called EKGs, and they had like some issues, like 40% of those people with pre-existing heart conditions, they would have issues with driving. It would like cause, I forgot what specifically, but it'd make it worse for you. And even if you are driving, just in general, if you're driving behind somebody who doesn't have a catalytic converter, you're going to get things like carbon monoxide. You're going to be inhaling that because it goes back into your system and it goes into your car. And you're going to be breathing some of that, and that's not good for you at all. So as you can see, the oxidation reactions, we have them on the screen. You can see that it converts hydrocarbon into CO2 and H2O. Those are pretty good. And then you have carbon monoxide, also bad. That mixes with the oxygen and that makes CO2. And you have nitric acid, nitrogen dioxide, and that turns into nitrogen and oxygen. So basically what happens is as these gases leave the engine, they go through this catalytic converter, it causes a reaction, and then it goes out as something much more pleasant to the environment. Even if you go back to the previous slide, you can see this thing right here, this tube thingy, that's actually a clear catalytic converter. And that red stuff that's glowing, that's things like, I don't know specifically which one it is, but that's either palladium or rhodium. That's a reaction going on, and it's basically converting those gases into something much better. And then next slide. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. Catalytic converters.
This is our, we're excited. Just have all the links we used. And then there's our bonus slide about rolling coal. So this is a popular trend with mostly in the South with diesel engines. Since they produce this black soot, naturally people take out the catalytic converter and the filters that prevent this black soot from being released, just so their car can do this for some reason. There is not really any benefit of doing this. The car doesn't go faster, and no one likes it. And people are actually pressing for this to become illegal. So if you see this, call the police on them. They're killing the environment. Yeah. And that's the end of our presentation.